Hi, thank you so much. Welcome back to part B. My name is Lesley Donaldson, and what I'm talking about today is the story. It's an online Bible study. So today we have started to read chapter 3, part A, and it also included the discussion questions from chapter 2. So I want to just jump straight back in because this is incredibly interesting. This is about Joseph, the story of Joseph and his Technicolor dream coat, as people would say it. But we're going to learn what God says about Joseph and his coat and the significance of that and his family and so forth. So what has just happened, please do go back and read it, but I'll give you the brief synopsis that Pharaoh has just called for Joseph to come out of jail and interpret his dream. He says he cannot do it, but he says, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So let's continue reading. Chapter 3, it says, chapter 3, Joseph, from slave to deputy Pharaoh. We're going to take up here. Pharaoh explained his two dreams this way. 7 beautiful fat cows emerge from the Nile only to be eaten by 7 ugly, skinny cows. Then 7 savory heads of grain on a single stalk are swallowed up by 7 dried up, worthless heads. What do you make of that? Pharaoh asked Joseph. Giving credit to God for this gift of interpretation, Joseph told Pharaoh that the twin dreams foretold 7 years of bumper crops to be followed by 7 years of dried up fields and famine. God planned it this way, Joseph said, so there could be no doubt it would happen. Joseph's recommendation to Pharaoh was to put a wise man in charge of storing food and preparing for the coming famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put on a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted for him. Make way! Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt. Sure enough, for 7 wonderful years, Egyptian farmers could hardly believe how full their harvests were. Farms yielded enough for the people to eat well and still store up the coming bad times. Joseph knew another kind of fruitfulness during this time. His wife had had 2 sons. He gave them the names of Manasseh and Ephraim. I may not have said them correctly, so please look them up. Then, as Joseph had predicted, the blue skies over Egypt became hot and parched. The crops were withered. But Joseph had already planned ahead and stored a sufficient supply of food and kept the Egyptians healthy and Pharaoh's foreign trade business even healthier. Even the weather patterns fit into God's bigger plan. Because the drought was so severe, neighboring nations began to approach Egypt for help just to stay alive. And just look who shows up. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. That's interesting. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Can you imagine? As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "Now, my lord," they answered, "your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them, "you have come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lived in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." And then he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go back and take grain back to your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and that you may not die." They proceeded to do. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life. But we would not listen. That's why this distress is coming on us." Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Younger brother Benjamin could appear in Egypt. He secretly returned. Oh, hang on here. Make sure I didn't. Oh, yeah. Starts off here. Joseph developed a deceitful plan. he imprisoned one of his brothers, Simeon, as a supposed hostage until his absent brother, Benjamin, could appear in Egypt. He secretly returned the money used to purchase their grain to the brothers' bags. He kept his own identity from them by using his second language, all the while hearing perfectly well their own expressed fears. Then these 10 brothers were desperately confused. But Father Jacob wasn't confused at all. When the 10 sons told him the terms of sale, Jacob wouldn't budge. No way would he surrender the young Benjamin to his Egyptian leader's examination, or even to the sorry band of sons who had allegedly lost Joseph to a wild beast so many years before. It looked like a stalemate, stubborn souls refusing to confront their secret fears, until hunger, that great persuader, drove them towards compromise and compliance. Famine. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you." Then their father, Israel, said to them, "If it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take your brother also and go back to the man at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, I am bereaved, and I am bereaved." So the men took the gifts and double the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. Can you imagine? When Joseph came home, they presented him the gifts they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and then he said, How is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well." And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is your youngest brother the one you told me about?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out. Controlling himself, he said, "Serve the food." I can't imagine. Okay. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. So they feasted and drank freely with him. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of the house: "Fill the man's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of the sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one sack, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing that you have done.'" When he caught up with them, he repeated those words to them. But they said to him, "Why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We have brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, we will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves." "Very well then," he said, "let it be as you say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame." Each of them quickly lowered their sack to the ground and opened it. When the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves on the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say to my Lord?" Judah replied, "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves. We ourselves are the one who was found to have the cup." But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in peace." Then Judah went up to him and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. Your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, and I said he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in misery.'" Pardon me. "So now, if the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't here, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of your father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, 'If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return to his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that could come on my father.' Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all the attendants, and he cried out, 'Have everyone leave my presence.' So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified in his presence. They didn't see this coming at all. Not at all. I hope I've been reading it okay and you've been keeping up so far, because this is crazy. When Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me," when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve you for a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Wow. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, "This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You, your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, so that my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt, and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly." Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him. Can you imagine what they said? Do you have brothers and sisters, and how is their relationship? That's, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about my own relationship and my own family and brothers and sisters and what happens and the strife. And actually a lot of that, I did make a personal series. There's a lot that went on there. By the grace of God, I was able to talk about that and move on and rebuild some relationships and so forth and make amends with what's going on. So I'm going to leave it there. This is about our 25-minute segment here. What a great place to leave off. Really think about that. And I might have read a bit quickly, so maybe if you need to go back and re-listen to it, I think I might have to, so that I know about all the players. Though I do know these stories, this book is giving me details that I really didn't know before, and I'm happy to read through them. So thank you so much. This is the end of part B. I'm going to come right back, finish the chapter part 3, and go from there. Thank you so much. Bye now.